Thanksgiving was supposed to feel warm, gentle firelight, the smell of roasted turkey, a full table, and the quiet comfort of family. Instead, that night felt like someone had cracked open my chest and poured winter straight into it. Snow drifted lazily outside the dining room window as I stood up, joints stiff, the weight of 65 years heavier than usual. The fire behind me cast soft orange light across the room. My daughter Fern scrolled on her phone. Her husband, Vernon, chewed lazily at his turkey. Sophie poked at her dessert, and Alex was glued to his screen. Maria's picture overlooked the table from the mantel, her smile frozen in a time when my family still felt like something whole. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the envelope I'd prepared. The paper edge brushed my fingertips. I told myself all morning that gifting it would make Fern's life easier, that maybe she'd smile, or at the very least, look me in the eye. I cleared my throat gently. "Fern, honey, I've got something for you. Happy Thanksgiving." She didn't even lift her head. She snatched the envelope with one hand while her other thumb kept scrolling. She tore it open without interest, letting the paper fall near her plate. Vernon didn't look up. Alex kept scrolling. Only Sophie peeked at me for half a second before dropping her gaze again. Fern finally looked at the check, $5,000. Enough to wipe out most of the credit card mess she'd cried to me about at 2 in the morning last month. Her expression didn't change at all. Not a thank you, not a smile, nothing. "5,000, she said, voice flat. "That's it." The words hit harder than they should have. I forced a small breath. "I figured it would help with the debt you mentioned." Fern finally looked up. Her eyes were colder than the snow outside. "You know what the best gift would actually be?" she said calmly, as if she were ordering coffee. "Your absence. For good." Everything went silent. Even the popping fire seemed to pause. Vernon froze mid-cut. Sophie dropped her fork. Alex blinked for the first time in 10 minutes. Only Fern stayed perfectly still, her face carved out of stone. My mouth went dry. What did you say?" "You heard me," she replied, sliding the check onto the table as if it were trash. "You're always here, always controlling, always waving money around like a leash. We can't breathe with you around." I gripped the chair behind me. My hands shook so badly I had to steady myself. "Fern, I only ever tried to help." "Help?" she laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "You wanted control. You wanted us trapped under you forever. You never wanted us to stand on our own. You needed us to depend on you." Her words sliced through every memory I had of helping her. Paying for diapers when she couldn't afford them, replacing furnaces in midwinter, covering rent when Vernon was between jobs, driving across town at 3 a.m. when she panicked about money or car trouble. I'd always come. Always. "I bought this house for you," I whispered, "because you couldn't pay rent, because you needed help, because you asked." "Exactly," she snapped. "You bought it in your name so you could hold it over us forever. We want a fresh start. We can't move. We can't sell. We can't do anything because you made sure everything is tied to you." Vernon opened his mouth to say something but quickly closed it when Fern shot him a look that could peel paint. I stared at them all, the family I'd supported for 15 years without blinking. My throat felt tight. "I think I need some air," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. I walked toward the kitchen, feeling all their eyes on my back. Fern muttered something else, but the blood rushing in my ears drowned out the words. I pushed through the swinging kitchen door, letting it thud shut behind me. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and cold compared to the dining room's glow. I braced myself against the sink, splashing cold water onto my face. The icy shock steadied me for a moment. She'd said it. She had truly said it. The world would be better with me gone. My reflection stared back from the dark window. Tired man. A man who had given everything. A man who apparently had nothing left that anyone valued. The door slammed open. "Don't you walk away from me," Fern barked, storming inside. Plates rattled as she grabbed a sponge and started scrubbing, each movement sharp enough to cut. "I needed a moment," I said quietly. "What you said. It was hurtful." "Hurtful," she scoffed, scrubbing harder. Try being smothered for 40 years. Try living with someone who keeps score with every dollar he spends. That's not true. You don't even see it, do you? She said, pointing a wet finger at me. You think sacrifice makes you a hero. It doesn't. It makes you controlling. My body felt heavy. So heavy. Fern, I murmured. When did helping you become a crime? When we told you we want to sell the house and leave, she snapped. Arizona. New start. But we can't because it's yours. Always yours. And then everything made sense. This wasn't about dependency. This wasn't about control. This wasn't about me being overbearing. This was about money. The house. The equity. The life I'd paid for. She wanted me gone so she could have the house. She wanted me erased. The realization settled inside me like a stone dropped into deep water. Slow, heavy, irreversible. I stepped away from her, feeling something inside me fracture cleanly. And in that moment, a thought formed, quiet, cold, and final. Maybe disappearing wasn't such a bad idea, just not in the way she meant. Fern's accusations kept echoing in my head long after I left the kitchen. I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom as if I were moving through a different house, one I no longer recognized. The air felt heavier, the lights harsher, the walls narrower. My steps sounded too loud, and yet somehow muffled. My bedroom door closed behind me with a soft click. Silence swallowed the room. Only the faint hum of the furnace traveled through the vents, like the house was breathing shallowly. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to understand how everything had crumbled so fast. My daughter, my little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest and ask me to chase the monsters from her closet, had looked me dead in the eye and practically pronounced me a burden, a nuisance, an obstacle standing between her and whatever life she thought she deserved. I leaned back in my old rocking chair by the window. It creaked beneath my weight, the same familiar sound I'd heard countless nights after Maria passed. I used to sit here holding that old photo album, reminding myself that I once had a wife who loved me, a daughter who adored me, and a home that felt warm. But now, the house didn't feel like mine at all except on paper. Outside, the street was quiet. Snowflakes drifted past the lamppost, glowing faintly under the yellow light. A few cars moved slowly through the slush. Somewhere in the distance a siren wailed, then faded into the night. I pulled the leather-bound photo album from the shelf and placed it on my lap. The cover was worn, corners frayed, but it still carried Maria's scent. Vanilla and lavender. Faint but familiar. I exhaled shakily and opened it. There she was, Maria in her wedding dress. Her smile so bright it could have lit an entire city. My younger self stood beside her, hopeful, proud, stupidly confident that life would always be kind. I turned the pages slowly. Maria holding baby Fern. Fern at 5 wearing my oversized hard hat. Fern on her first day of school with missing front teeth. Maria hugging her at the playground. The memories hit like a punch to the chest. That little girl in the photos looked at me with complete trust. So when had that trust rotted into resentment? When had I become the villain in her story? I flipped to a picture of Maria holding Fern at the beach. Fern maybe 3 years old, gripping her mother's dress with sandy fingers. Maria looked happy, peaceful, the kind of peace she never had in her last years. She would have been ashamed of today, I whispered. The room stayed still. Even the furnace seemed to quiet down. I placed the album aside and rubbed my eyes. My palms were rough, calloused, hands shaped by decades of construction work, overtime shifts, and repairing everything around this house. These hands had carried Fern on their shoulders, fixed her bikes, paid her bills, and bailed her out of 3 financial disasters. And now they trembled. I stood up and walked toward the window, pressing my forehead gently against the cold glass. The shock grounded me. The cold was something I could understand, something honest, unlike the heat from Fern's cruelty. My mind wandered to numbers, as it often did when I needed clarity. 15 years of mortgage payments. $1,600 a month on average. Nearly $300,000 paid so far. Money I would never see again. Money Fern probably believed she deserved. But she didn't own a single brick. Not legally. I did. And suddenly that mattered in a way it never had before. I returned to the rocking chair and picked up my old calculator. Big buttons, scratch screen, still reliable. I began listing everything on a yellow notepad, calculating each bailout, each emergency loan, each instance when Fern cried and I dropped everything to help. When I finished, the total made my chest tighten. $349,000. My throat felt raw. My sacrifices had become her entitlement. My love had become her leverage. Maybe Maria had been right all along. She used to warn me gently, "Don't let kindness become a chain around your own ankle, Lem." And I'd always laughed it off. I'd believed family meant helping until it hurt, and then helping some more. Maybe that was my mistake. Somewhere between those numbers and the cold glass and the echo of Fern's words, something shifted inside me. Something breaking loose. Something freeing itself. I sat back, hands clasped tightly. If Fern wanted freedom so badly, maybe it was time she had it. Just not the way she imagined. A thought formed quietly. A decision. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just final. I needed answers. Legal answers. I needed to know exactly what my rights were, what the contract said, what the law allowed. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't going to act blindly out of love. I was going to act out of self-respect. And maybe, just maybe, out of survival. My hand reached for my phone almost without thinking. I scrolled through contacts until I found the number I needed. Mark Rivera. Old colleague. Trusted lawyer. My finger hovered over the call button. Once I pressed it, everything would begin to change. I pressed it. The phone rang once. Twice. Mark Rivera speaking. Mark, it's Lem, I said quietly. I need legal advice. Urgently. Silence. Then his voice turned serious. What happened? A lot. Can you meet tomorrow morning? Of course. 10 o'clock. My office. Thank you, I whispered. I hung up. My heart felt heavy, but for the first time that night, steady. Saturday morning arrived with a sharp, gray chill. I barely slept, just drifted in and out of shallow dreams until dawn finally pried my eyes open. The house was quiet, maybe too quiet. If Fern and Vernon were awake, they kept their distance. Fine by me. I dressed carefully. Not for them, but for Mark. I hadn't seen him in years except through occasional holiday cards and the sporadic comment thread on Facebook. But he'd always been dependable, a man who understood the law the way I understood structural loads. And he spoke with the same blunt honesty I valued. By 9 a.m., I was on the train headed downtown. The ride felt surreal. Oak Park rolled away behind me, while Chicago's skyline grew in the distance, steel and glass rising into a pale winter sky. People around me lived lives untouched by my crisis. A mother wrangling a toddler, a nurse sipping from a thermos, a man reading the newspaper. For once, I envied their normal problems. When the train pulled into Washington Station, I stepped out into the cold wind that whipped off Lake Michigan. Mark's building loomed 2 blocks ahead. Sleek, modern, far more polished than the job site trailers I'd spent most of my life in. I entered the lobby, rode the elevator up to the 28th floor, and felt my heartbeat thrum in my chest as I approached his door. Rivera and Associates was etched in brass across frosted glass. I knocked. Come in, a familiar voice called. Mark stood from his desk when I entered. Same sharp jawline, same salt and pepper hair, same steady eyes. He clasped my hand firmly. Lem, he said, concern immediately tightening his expression. You sounded shaken. Sit down. I handed him the folder I'd brought. The mortgage contract, the printed statements, the recent confirmation letters. He opened it without another word. Years of experience sharpened his focus instantly. His eyes scanned the pages with surgical precision. He didn't speak for several minutes. Only the soft rustle of papers filled the room. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses, and exhaled through his nose. All right, Lem, he said. Here's the truth. The entire truth. I braced myself. This property is 100% yours. No ambiguity. No shared ownership. No co-signers. Nothing. I blinked. Explain that. Mark tapped the mortgage contract. You're the sole owner on every legal document. The home is registered under your name, financed by your income, and every payment for the last 15 years has come from you. Your daughter and her husband? They're occupants at best. Legally, they're equivalent to tenants. The weight of his words sank in slowly, like sand filling a jar. So, they have no claim to it? None, he said firmly. Not financially, not legally, not contractually. They don't own a single tile in that house. I swallowed, my throat dry. And if I wanted them out? Mark paused. He folded his hands on the desk and studied my face. Lem, are you absolutely sure you want to go down that road? This isn't a temporary argument. It's a fracture you can't glue back. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. Mark, my own daughter told me the world would be better without me. She wants me gone for good. And now I know why. They want the house. Mark's eyes darkened. She said that. I nodded. His jaw tightened. Then yes, you can remove them. How? I asked. Several ways, he replied. Since they have no lease, you can issue a termination of occupancy notice on any timeline allowed by Illinois law. Typically, that's 30 days. Is there a faster option? He hesitated. Yes, 14 days. 2 weeks. Completely legal. Completely enforceable. He waited for my reaction. But something in me had already hardened. Draft it, I said. Mark held up a hand. Before I do, I want you to think. I've been thinking for 15 years, I interrupted. Draft it. He studied me for a long, heavy moment, then nodded. All right. He turned to his computer. The keys clicked rapidly as he typed out the notice. Formal language, legal citations, dates, consequences. I watched the printer warm up and spit out the final pages. Mark signed at the bottom and placed the documents into a crisp envelope. He slid it across the desk toward me. This, he said, gives them 14 days from the moment they receive it. If they don't leave, you have full authority to begin eviction. My hand hovered over the envelope. Felt like picking up a weapon. Lem, Mark said quietly. Once you hand this over, there's no turning back. I met his eyes. Inside me, a storm of betrayal and clarity raged. I thought of Fern's voice. Cold, sharp, annihilating. Telling me she'd be better off when I was no longer around. I picked up the envelope. I'm not turning back, I said. Not this time. Mark stood, placed a firm hand on my shoulder. For what it's worth, he said softly, you're doing what you need to do. Not everyone has the courage to stop being used. I nodded once. Then I left his office, envelope in hand, future rewritten. The air outside felt different, brighter, sharper, like the first real breath after being underwater for too long. I didn't know exactly what I would do next, but for the first time in years, the next steps were mine to choose. The train ride back home felt strangely quiet, even though the car was full of people bundled in winter coats. My fingers kept brushing the envelope inside my jacket, the one Mark had handed me. 14 days. That was all it would take to end 15 years of dependence, manipulation, and resentment. But as the train rattled along, something unexpected stirred in me. Not anger, not bitterness, relief. The idea of reclaiming my home, my peace, my dignity. It felt like thawing after a long winter. I stared out the window as the cityscape blurred past, wondering why it had taken me so long to see that I wasn't obligated to remain trapped in a life where I was treated as an obstacle instead of family. The train reached Oak Park. Snow had thickened on the sidewalks, crunching under my boots as I walked home. My breath formed pale clouds in the air. When I reached the porch, I paused, staring at the front door. The door I'd installed myself, the one Fern always complained, looked old-fashioned. This was still my house. Every nail, every shingle, every pipe. I stepped inside. Vernon was at the dining table, half slumped over his laptop. The moment he saw me, he straightened up too fast, like he'd been up to something. Fern wasn't in sight, but her voice traveled faintly from the upstairs hallway. The kids' laughter came from the living room. For a second, I just stood there, watching them live inside the walls I paid for. A strange mixture of sadness and clarity washed over me. Vernon forced a smile. "Oh hey, Lem. You were out early. Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I simply hung my coat and walked past him without a word. Whatever explanations he wanted, he'd get soon enough. I made myself a cup of hot tea and sat at the kitchen table. The house buzzed with the sound of ordinary life. Dishes clinking, Sophie humming, Alex stomping around pretending to be a superhero. It all sounded so normal, so painfully typical. But normal didn't erase what had happened the night before. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth steady me. I needed to think. I needed to plan this carefully, not out of spite but out of necessity. I wasn't going to create chaos. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to stoop to their level. I was going to end this with the same quiet clarity that had guided me into Mark's office. I heard Fern's footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, face still carrying that permanent scowl she'd worn since her argument the previous night. "You left without saying anything," she said flatly. "Where did you go?" I met her eyes calmly. "Out." She rolled hers. "Well, we need to talk about last night." I remained silent. She took it as a green light. "You can't just walk away the moment someone confronts you," she said sternly. "You hurt people too, Dad. Maybe if you listened for once." I stood up slowly, and she fell silent. Not because I was angry, but because she'd never seen me this calm. "I listened for years, Fern," I said softly. "But I wasn't being heard." She blinked, confused. Before she could respond, I walked past her, heading to my workshop room in the back of the house, the one space that remained fully mine. The walls were lined with tools, blueprints, boxes of screws and bolts. My drafting table sat by the window, covered in years of finished and unfinished plans. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. For 30 minutes I sketched. Measurements, layouts, notes. Not for renovations. Not for construction. For my future. A future where I lived alone again. Where silence wasn't punishment. Where I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own home. The clock ticked closer to noon when a soft knock landed on the door. "Dad," Sophie's small voice said. "Mom wants you." I opened the door a crack. Sophie stood there with big worried eyes, her little fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. "Sophie," I said gently, "you okay?" She nodded faintly, but her eyes were sad. "You and Mom, are you mad at each other?" My heart softened instantly. Kids see everything, more than their parents realize. "No," I said tenderly, kneeling to her level. "Grandpa's not mad. Just thinking." She leaned in and hugged me tightly. I hugged her back, fighting the tightness in my throat. These kids weren't at fault. They never were. Before I could say anything else, Fern's voice cut sharply from the hallway. "Sophie, I told you to get your jacket." Sophie flinched and pulled away, running toward her mother. Fern didn't even look at me when she grabbed her daughter's hand. "We're going to the grocery store," she snapped. "We'll be back." The door slammed behind them, and suddenly the house was quiet. I sat back at my drafting table and placed the envelope from my lawyer beside the sketch. Everything I needed was right there. Clarity, evidence, authority. But then a thought came to me. Unexpected, unsettling, strangely fitting. Why stop at eviction? Why not take the house back in a way Fern would never expect? A way she couldn't twist or manipulate. An idea bold, drastic, took shape in my mind. A plan that would give Fern exactly what she claimed she wanted. Freedom, but on my terms. My hand tightened around the pen. The more I thought about it, the more the idea seemed inevitable, almost poetic. A way to close this chapter once and for all. A way to reclaim not just my home, but my life. I folded the sketch carefully and slipped it into the drawer with the notice. 2 pieces of paper. 2 choices. And I knew which one I was going to act on soon. I just needed the right moment. The house stayed quiet for nearly an hour after Fern and the kids left. Vernon had disappeared into the garage. probably pretending to fix something to avoid conversation. The silence felt heavy, but not suffocating. Not anymore. Felt like the pause before a decision, a breath before a leap. I sat at the kitchen table, envelope resting in front of me like a sealed secret. 14 days notice. Legal. Binding. Unstoppable. I traced a finger along the flap. A part of me wanted to storm into the living room the moment Fern returned and hand her the paper in front of everyone. Let her face drop. Let her freeze. Let her finally understand that I wasn't the powerless old man she thought. But I stopped myself. No, this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about freedom, mine, not hers. I stood, stretched old bones, and made myself a second cup of tea. The steam curled into the air, warming my cheeks. As I drank, I replayed last night's scene again, Fern pointing her wet finger at me, accusing me of shackles and control. Her words dripping with contempt. You're always here. You smother us. Your absence would be the best gift. It stung then. It didn't sting now. Now I understood the truth. Fern didn't want me gone. She wanted what I owned. She wanted the house. She wanted control. She wanted the life I'd built. But she would get none of it. After finishing my tea, I moved to the living room. The house looked so different when it was quiet, like it remembered who it truly belonged to. The photographs on the wall weren't theirs. The furniture wasn't theirs. Even the rug beneath my feet had been chosen by Maria and me on a freezing November morning decades ago. This was my home, my history, my anchor, and yet, something in me whispered that holding onto it wasn't the victory I needed. What if letting go was the real win? Not letting go of myself, letting go of them, and letting them watch, helpless, as everything they assumed they'd inherit slipped through their fingers. The thought grew roots, then branches, then a full tree. By the time Fern returned, I was sitting calmly on the sofa, hands folded. She walked in carrying bags, shoving them onto the kitchen counter with her usual irritated energy. The kids ran upstairs. Vernon followed Fern in with the heavier bags, avoiding my gaze. She finally turned to me with a clipped tone. We need to finish our conversation from last night. No, I said gently. We don't. Her brows shot up. Excuse me? There's nothing left to talk about, I continued. I understand exactly where we stand. She crossed her arms. And where's that? On opposite ends of a line neither of us will cross again. She scoffed. Oh God. Here you go with your dramatic speeches. What line? You're impossible to talk to. I looked at her without anger, just calm recognition. You made yourself very clear, Fern. She opened her mouth again, but I stood up, cutting her off. I need some time, I said. Some space. I'm taking a short trip. She blinked. What trip? Since when? Since this morning. For how long? I'm not sure yet. She shook her head in disgust. Dad, this is ridiculous. You can't run away every time you hear something you don't like. I'm not running, I said softly. I'm moving. Her eyes narrowed. Moving? What does that mean? I didn't answer. Instead, I went to my room, took out a duffel bag, and began packing only essentials. Clothes, toiletries, documents, Maria's photo, the sketch from last night, and, after a long hesitation, the envelope from Mark. I zipped the bag slowly. Every sound in the house felt sharper. The thud of the zipper, the creak of the floor, the hum of the heater. I walked back to the living room with the duffel slung over my shoulder. Fern stared at it like it was a live bomb. You're leaving? She demanded. Yes. For how long? She repeated, voice rising. As long as it takes. For what? To make a decision. She stepped toward me, furious. You're being childish. Running out like this. You're just proving my point. No. I interrupted, voice steady. What I'm about to do will prove yours wrong. She froze. The confidence drained from her face for a split second, replaced by nervous confusion. Dad? What are you planning? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the front door and opened it. Cold air swept into the house. I stepped out, turned around, and for the first time in years, I locked the door behind me, from the inside, not as a homeowner, as a man reclaiming his life. Fern yanked the handle. Dad, Dad, open this door. Don't you walk away from me. Her voice echoed behind the wood, full of panic, fury, desperation, an unfamiliar blend. I didn't look back. I walked down the driveway, snow crunching beneath my boots. My car waited. My freedom waited. My plan waited. When I reached the driver's seat, I slid in and exhaled deeply. Tonight, I would start what Fern never expected, what she could never stop. And once it began, everything would change. The tires crunched through the snow as I backed out of the driveway, leaving the house and Fern's furious banging behind me. For a moment, I watched the porch through the windshield. Her silhouette was a blur behind the frosted glass. Still shouting, still yanking the handle, still demanding answers she wasn't ready for. Then I turned the wheel and drove away. The farther I got from the house, the lighter my chest felt. The tightness that had lived under my ribs for years slowly loosened, making room for something new, clarity, maybe even peace. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove, block after block, past the library, past the bakery where Maria used to buy peach tarts, past the school Fern once attended. Every street held a piece of memory, but none of those memories held me in place anymore. Eventually, I turned into a quiet park on the edge of town. Snow blanketed the field like a clean sheet waiting for a new story. I pulled into an empty parking spot near the frozen pond and shut off the engine. The silence pressed around me, soft and comforting. I didn't rush to get out. Instead, I sat with my thoughts. Fern's anger, her sense of entitlement, her belief that she owned me and everything I built. All of it had formed the perfect storm, and I was finally stepping out of it. Still, a small part of me wondered what she was doing right now. Probably pacing the house, panicking that I'd finally slipped out of her grip. Maybe yelling at Vernon. Maybe blaming him for not stopping me. I took a long breath and reached into my coat, pulling out the envelope and unfolding the sketch from last night. The lines I'd drawn spoke back to me, decisions shaped by pain but guided by reason. My plan wasn't impulsive anymore. It was necessary. It was overdue. I stepped out of the car. The cold air slapped my cheeks awake. My boots sank into the snow with each step as I walked toward a bench by the pond. I brushed off the snow and sat, watching a few sparrows hop across the frozen ground. For once, I felt like the world wasn't expecting anything from me. But back at the house, the storm was growing. Fern's side of the story began unfolding the moment she realized I wasn't coming back. She slammed her phone onto the counter after trying to call me 5 times. Straight to voicemail each time. She cursed under her breath, pacing like a trapped animal. Vernon entered hesitantly, holding one of the grocery bags they'd forgotten to unpack. "You okay?" he asked carefully. "Do I look okay?" she snapped. Vernon set the bag down quietly. "He'll be back. He always comes back." "Not this time," she hissed. "He had a bag, packed, and he locked the door. He never locks the door. Something's off." Vernon shifted uncomfortably. "Well, maybe he needs space." "Space?" Fern scoffed. "No, Vernon. He's planning something. I know it." She walked to the window and peered out into the empty driveway. Her fingers drummed anxiously on the windowsill. "He's hiding something," she whispered. "And I'm going to find out what." She grabbed her phone again and dialed a number she had memorized but rarely used. "Hello?" a woman answered. "Hi, Aunt Linda," Fern said quickly. "I need your help. It's about my dad." Linda, the only sibling Maria had always been a quiet presence in our lives. She loved Fern but never interfered unless absolutely necessary. She'd always said I was a good father, even when Fern acted like I wasn't. "What happened?" Linda asked, her voice steady. "He's acting strange," Fern said. "He stormed out with a bag, locked us inside, and said he's making a decision. I think he's planning something drastic." There was silence on the line. "What kind of drastic?" Linda asked slowly. "I don't know," Fern said. But he's been weird, secretive. And he was looking through documents last night. Mortgage papers. Fern paused, lowering her voice. I think he's trying to kick us out. Linda sighed deeply. Fern, you need to calm down. Lem isn't unreasonable. If something's wrong, talk to him. We did talk. Fern interrupted. And he walked out. Maybe because you were harsh, Linda responded gently. Fern froze. The truth in those words stung her, but she shook it off. I need to get ahead of this, she whispered, before he does something stupid. You're overreacting, Linda said. Just wait for him to come home. No, Fern replied firmly. I'm not waiting. She hung up abruptly. Vernon, who'd heard most of the call, rubbed the back of his neck. What are you thinking of doing? Fern didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing, connecting dots even where none existed. He's going to a lawyer, she said finally. I know it. But why would he? Because he wants to take everything, she snapped. She stormed toward my workshop room, the one I always kept locked. But this time she tried the handle. It opened. Inside, she saw my drafting table, the papers I'd been sketching on, the envelope Mark gave me. But not the notice itself. I had taken it with me. Still, the sight of the cleared table was enough to make her panic. He's hiding something, she whispered, eyes narrowing. She grabbed her coat. Vernon, get the kids ready. We're going out. Where? He asked, confused. To find him, Fern said with cold determination. Before he destroys our lives. Back at the park, I had no idea any of this was happening. I simply sat on the bench, watching snow drift onto the quiet pond, thinking about my next move. About the one step that would change everything. Legally, emotionally, permanently. A decision that wasn't about hurting Fern, but about saving myself. I didn't know that my daughter had already started her own counterattack. And I definitely didn't know that both our plans were about to collide. The cold worked its way through my jacket as I sat on the park bench, but I didn't mind. I'd lived through winters far worse, and besides, numbness felt almost welcome now. After the storm inside my house, this quiet, this stillness, felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I pulled out Maria's picture from my coat pocket. Her smile, warm and patient, felt like a reminder that someone had once loved me without conditions, without expectations, without using me. I don't know what you'd tell me to do, I murmured, but I hope you'd understand. A voice answered behind me. I think she would. I froze. That voice, soft, familiar, edged with age, rolled over me like a ghost brushing past. I turned slowly. There, bundled in a long gray coat and thick scarf, stood Aunt Linda. She held a thermos tucked under one arm, her breath forming pale clouds in the air. Her eyes, the same kind Maria had, were fixed on me with a mixture of sympathy and concern. How did you? I began. She walked closer and sat beside me, shrugging off the cold as if it didn't bother her. Fern called me, she said simply. She sounded frantic. Lem, I figured you'd be somewhere quiet, thinking. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she'd find me. Linda knew me almost as well as Maria had. She'd watched me through my happiest years, and my darkest ones. Before you worry, she added. I didn't tell her where I was going. I told her to stay put. She smirked. Which means, knowing Fern, she's probably doing the opposite. That sounds about right, I said with a tired sigh. Linda unscrewed the thermos lid and handed it to me. Steam rose up, chamomile tea. Maria's favorite. You're freezing, she said. Drink. I took a sip. The warmth spread through my chest, loosening the tightness inside. Linda, I said after a moment, I don't think Fern sees me as family anymore. Not really. To her, I swallowed hard. An inconvenience she wants gone. Linda didn't flinch. She didn't tell me I was wrong. She didn't sugarcoat anything. That girl is scared, she said. And Fern is dangerous when she's scared. She paused. She acts first, thinks later, regrets never. I nodded. She wants the house. Linda didn't look surprised. I guessed as much. She told me I smother her, I said quietly. That my absence would be the best gift. Linda turned fully toward me, eyes fierce. Lem, she said sternly. Fern doesn't understand the weight of her words. She never has. You protected her too well. That hit deeper than I expected. You didn't raise her wrong, she continued. You raised her alone. Alone, grieving, trying to be both parents. And Fern grew comfortable with that. Too comfortable. I stared at the frozen pond, its banks clean and white. What are you planning to do? Linda asked gently. I folded my hands, feeling the envelope inside my coat shift slightly. I went to a lawyer, I said. I know the house is legally mine. I can remove them, legally, peacefully, quickly. Linda didn't react immediately. She clasped her gloved hands together and exhaled softly. I'm not against that, she said. In fact, it might be good for everyone. But, she looked at me sideways. That's not all you're planning, is it? She knew me too well. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my coat and pulled out the folded sketch I'd made last night. The future I'd imagined. I handed it to her silently. Linda unfolded the paper slowly. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh, she whispered. She looked at me with astonishment. You want to move? Sell the place? Start over completely? I nodded. The house has too many ghosts, I said. Too many battles. Too many expectations. And staying there means staying under Fern's shadow and letting her feel entitled to everything I own. Linda leaned back, thoughtful. And taking the house from her, selling it before she can touch a penny, would be a lesson she never forgets. It's not about punishing her, I said quietly. It's about letting go, detaching, ending the cycle. For a long moment, Linda didn't speak. Then she gave a slow, approving nod. I think Maria would understand, she said softly. More than you think. The cold wind whipped around us. I pulled my coat tighter. But you need to be careful, she said suddenly, voice shifting. Fern thinks you're preparing something dangerous. She's scared, Lem. Scared people make stupid decisions. Reckless ones. I sighed. I know. And, Linda continued, she's looking for you. I turned sharply. What? She didn't say it, but I could hear it in her voice. She's not staying home like I told her. Linda's lips tightened. She's going to search for you, Lem. And she won't be alone. A ripple of unease slid through me. I hadn't expected that. I thought leaving would give me space. Time. Breathing room. But Fern was not giving me space. She was preparing a counterattack. Hunting me down. Trying to regain control. Linda placed a hand on my arm. You need to be ahead of her, she said. If she finds you before you execute your plan, she might ruin everything. I nodded slowly. Maybe I shouldn't have sat in the open. Maybe I shouldn't have lingered in town. Maybe, Lem, Linda said, leaning in closer. What exactly are you planning to do next? I reached into my coat, pulled out the envelope, placed it carefully between us on the bench. Linda stared at it. Is that? Yes, I said quietly. The notice. The one that changes everything. She exhaled. You're really doing it, she whispered. I nodded once. But before Linda could say another word, before I could tuck the envelope back into my coat, a car engine rumbled in the distance. We both turned. A familiar blue SUV rolled slowly into the parking lot. Fern's SUV. Linda's eyes widened. Lem. I know, I whispered, rising to my feet. And as the SUV turned sharply toward my direction, I realized Fern wasn't coming to talk. Her headlights locked onto me like a spotlight. She found me. Fern's SUV rolled into the snowy parking lot with a slow, deliberate crawl. Too slow to be casual, too deliberate to be coincidence. The engine's hum echoed across the empty park like a warning. Linda stood beside me, her breath catching. She's not alone, she murmured. As the SUV came closer, the passenger door opened before it had fully stopped. Vernon stepped out first, his face pale, eyes darting nervously between me and Fern behind the wheel. He looked like a man dragged somewhere he didn't want to be. Fern slammed her door shut and marched toward me with a pace that sent ice climbing up my spine. Her boots crunched angrily through the snow. "Dad," she snapped. "We're talking. Now." I didn't move. Linda stood at my side like a quiet shield. Fern pointed an accusing finger at her. "This is between me and him. You don't get to interfere." Linda's voice was calm steel. "I'm here to make sure no one says something they regret. Especially you." Fern scoffed and shook her head. "Of course you'd take his side. You always have." Vernon approached more slowly. "Lem, maybe we should all." Fern snapped at him without looking. "Don't speak." He fell silent. I breathed in slowly, planting my feet firmly in the snow. I wasn't going to run. Not this time. Fern stopped just a few feet away, her eyes flashing. "Why did you leave without telling anyone? Why did you lock the door?" "Because I needed space," I said evenly. "Space?" She laughed sharply. No, Dad. Stop pretending this is about your feelings. I know something is going on. You're hiding something." Linda shifted beside me. "Fern, calm down." "No," she shouted. "I'm done being calm." She turned her glare back to me. "You've been secretive for days. You looked through the mortgage papers. You left with a bag. And now you're meeting with her." She jabbed a finger toward Linda like she was pointing at a criminal. Linda took a step forward. "I'm here because you called me panicking. And because you're making this worse." Fern ignored her, eyes laser-focused on me. "Dad, I want to know what you're planning. Right now." Her voice trembled beneath all that anger. Beneath the fury. She was afraid. I held her gaze. "I'm planning to change my life." "That tells me nothing," she spat. "It's not supposed to," I replied. Her eyes widened. "You can't just walk out. You can't just leave us hanging." Something in me finally snapped. 15 years, Fern," I said quietly. 15 years of carrying you, paying for everything, being your safety net. And last night, you told me the world would be better without me." Her breath hitched. She hadn't expected me to throw her own words back at her. "That wasn't... I didn't..." She struggled for a moment. "You're twisting it." "No," I said. "You meant it. You wanted my absence. You wanted the house. You wanted control." Fern's face twisted. "The house? Are you serious? You think this is about property?" "Yes," I said. "Because you made it about property." "Dad, you're being paranoid," she hissed. "We just want stability." "Stability," I cut in. "Or ownership?" Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer. Vernon stepped in hesitantly. "Lem, maybe we should look at this calmly. You've been through a lot. Fern has been stressed. Let's just go home and..." Fern rounded on him like a storm. "Stop defending him." Vernon shrank back, eyes dropping to the ground. Linda let out a frustrated sigh. "Fern, do you even hear yourself? You're spiraling." "Shut up, Linda," Fern snapped. And that was the moment I knew she wasn't here to talk. She was here to corner me, to pressure me, to force me, to regain control. My fingers moved instinctively, brushing against the inside of my coat where the envelope lay hidden. Fern noticed. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "What's in your pocket?" she demanded. "Nothing for you," I replied. She lunged a step closer. "Give it to me." "No." Her voice rose. "Dad, give me what's in your pocket." I stepped back, my boots crunching in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The envelope inside my coat felt like a burning coal. Her eyes flicked to the outline of the envelope beneath the fabric. It was enough confirmation. "That's it, isn't it?" she whispered. She looked stunned, then furious. "You went to a lawyer," she said slowly, "and you are planning to throw us out." Vernon's head whipped toward her. "What?" "Fern, he wouldn't." "Yes, he would," she snapped. "Look at him." I swallowed. "I was planning to talk to you calmly before you." "No," she interrupted. "You were planning to blindside us." Linda stepped between us. "Fern, stop. Just stop." But Fern had locked onto something now. rage mixed with desperation, a toxic brew. "You think you can just take everything?" she shouted. "You think you can leave us homeless? Ruin the kids' lives?" "You ruined this," I said quietly. "When you told me I wasn't wanted." Her face reddened. "I didn't mean it." "Oh, you meant every word," Linda said sharply. Fern whirled on her. "Stay out of this." Then she turned back to me, tears now threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't do this. Please, don't take the house." The first hint of genuine fear I'd heard in her voice in years. But I had already made up my mind. "I'm not taking it," I said softly. "I'm taking myself." She stared at me, confused. "What does that even mean?" And then she saw something in my eyes, something she hadn't seen before. A boundary, a wall, a final line. "No," she breathed. "Dad, don't you dare." But she was too late. I reached into my coat. Her eyes widened, panic flooding her expression like a tidal wave. "Dad, please don't." Her voice cracked, but the envelope was already in my hand. Fern stared at the envelope in my hand as if it were a live fuse. Her entire posture stiffened, shoulders rising, breath catching. Eyes locked on it with a mixture of rage and terror. "Dad," she whispered, stepping forward. "Don't open that, please." But I didn't look at her. Instead, I opened the flap slowly, deliberately, letting the cold wind lift the corner of the paper. Vernon took an involuntary step back, like he expected the envelope to explode. "It's time," I said quietly. "For all of us." Fern shook her head violently. "And oh, Dad, stop. You don't understand." "Fern," Linda cut in, her voice low. "He understands more than you think." I pulled the folded document out. The notice. The 14-day termination of occupancy. Legal. Final. Unavoidable. Fern covered her mouth with her hands. "Dad, no, 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 no." I unfolded the paper and held it at my side, not reading it aloud, not waving it around, just letting its presence speak louder than any words could. "This is what happens," I said softly, "when you push someone to the edge and expect them to stay quiet." Fern's eyes flooded with tears. Not graceful tears, but raw, panicked ones. "You're throwing your own daughter out?" she screamed. "Your grandchildren? You'd really do that?" "I'm doing what you demanded last night," I said. "You said my absence would be the greatest gift." "That was a fight," she shouted. "I was upset. People say things when—" "You weren't upset," Linda snapped. "You were cruel." Fern spun toward her. "Stay out of it." But Linda didn't back down. "Someone has to tell you the truth." "Fern," I said quietly, "if you had come to me with respect, with kindness, if you had shown an ounce of appreciation after 15 years of support—" "I have been grateful," she yelled. "For what?" I asked calmly. "The insults? The accusations? The idea that you're entitled to everything I've built?" Her face twisted, and for a second, she looked like a child trapped in an adult's outrage. Then she whispered, voice trembling, I thought I could trust you." Vernon finally stepped forward, lifting his hands. "Lem, listen. Maybe we can figure something out. Maybe this doesn't have to be." "Vernon," I said, "you've taken advantage of me too, just in quieter ways." He opened his mouth, then shut it. Fern wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice cracking. "You're choosing a piece of paper over your family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." Her face contorted with disbelief. Then something inside her snapped. "This is not fair," she screamed. "You can't just destroy our lives because you're having a midlife crisis." I shook my head. "You destroyed this the moment you told me I wasn't wanted." Fern backed away a step, then another. Then her expression changed, shifting from fear to calculation. "Dad," she said slowly, "before you make this official, look at me." I did. Her lips trembled. Her eyes softened. Her voice grew quiet, fragile. "You're still my father." she whispered. You raised me. You took care of me. You helped us when we had nothing. I know I said terrible things, but, Dad, please, please don't take our home. The kids, they love living there. This will break them. It was the first real vulnerability I had seen in her in years. And for a second, just a second, I felt my resolve waver. But then Linda leaned in close and whispered, don't let her reel you back in with guilt. This is her pattern. And Fern's face shifted again. Too quickly. Too rehearsed. Her vulnerability flickered like a bad light bulb. I sighed. Fern, you're not sorry about what you said. You're sorry about the consequences. Her expression hardened instantly. The act shattered like glass. You want consequences? She snapped. Fine. Then hear this. She pointed at the envelope like it was a crime. If you file that, I swear I will fight you. I will drag you into court. I will tell everyone you're unstable. I will. Enough, Linda snapped. Stop threatening him. I held up a hand. No, Linda. Let her speak. It tells me everything I need to know. Fern's mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see it the moment she realized she'd gone too far. She pressed her lips together and turned away, shoulders shaking. Vernon tried to place a hand on her shoulder. She jerked away. Why would you do this? She whispered hoarsely. Why now? Because, I said, for the first time in my life, I'm choosing peace over chaos. She turned around, her face streaked with tears. You're not peaceful, she hissed. You're heartless. No, I said. Just done. She stepped toward me again slowly, almost in disbelief. You're really filing that notice? I didn't blink. Yes. That single word seemed to drain all color from her face. She looked like she might collapse. And then something unexpected happened. Vernon walked toward me. Not angrily. Not panicked. Not desperate. Just tired. Lem, he said, voice low. Before you do this, there's something you need to know. Something Fern hasn't told you. Fern whipped around. Vernon, no. He ignored her. Linda and I both tensed. What is it? I asked quietly. Vernon swallowed hard. Fern wasn't the only one lying to you. Fern lunged toward him, grabbing his arm. Don't you dare. Vernon pulled away. Lem, you need to hear the truth before you make any final decisions. My jaw tightened. What truth? Vernon met my eyes. The house. It's not just about money. There's something else Fern hid from you. The wind stilled. Linda froze. Fern's face went white. And Vernon whispered, something that changes everything. The winter wind howled across the empty parking lot as Vernon's words hung in the air, suspended between us like a blade. Fern's face drained of all color. Her hands balled into fists. She looked seconds away from either collapsing or exploding. Vernon, she whispered sharply. Don't you say another word. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me, and something in his eyes, the guilt, the fear, the exhaustion, told me the truth. Whatever he was about to say, it was big, bigger than anything the 14-day notice could cause. I steadied myself. Vernon, tell me. He exhaled shakily, rubbing his forehead. This wasn't my idea, Lem. I wanted to tell you months ago. But Fern. Shut up. Fern screamed, lunging toward him. Linda grabbed Fern's arm before she could reach him. Stop, Linda hissed. You've caused enough damage. Vernon shook his head, voice cracking. No, she needs to hear it. And so do you. He turned back to me. Lem, you remember when we said we needed help with our credit card debt? I nodded slowly. Yes. And you helped us with that loan? Yes. And then 3 months later, we said we were behind on taxes? I remembered that too. I had paid those as well. I nodded again, though confusion tightened inside me. Vernon looked like the truth weighed 1,000 pounds. We weren't behind on taxes, he whispered. We weren't drowning in credit cards. My stomach sank. I suddenly felt cold, colder than the wind. What do you mean? Vernon's voice was barely audible now. We needed money for something else. Fern erupted. Vernon, I swear to God. Fern, he snapped back with surprising force. Enough! She froze. He looked at me again. Lem, the reason Fern got so desperate for the house, why she wanted it at any cost, is because, he swallowed hard. We refinanced our own debts under your name. I blinked. I didn't understand. Not at first. Then the world shifted. You what? Vernon's voice grew shaky. Your identity. Your credit. Your information. Fern had access to your documents. She used them to secure a secondary personal loan. In your name. The ground beneath me felt like it tilted. Fern stepped forward, tears streaming, voice jagged with panic. Dad, listen, it's not what it sounds like, but it was exactly what it sounded like. You took a loan in my name? I whispered, staring at her. She sobbed harder. Dad, please, just listen. Vernon stepped in. She said you would forgive her. She said you always fix everything. She said you wouldn't notice because you handle the family finances. I told her it was wrong. I told her it was theft, fraud. It was not fraud. Fern screamed. I was going to pay it back. I turned slowly toward her. How much? Her mouth clamped shut. How much, Fern? She broke, finally cracking completely. 40,000. She sobbed. It was supposed to be temporary. I thought we'd pay it back fast. But then the interest grew, and the bills grew, and, Dad, I didn't know what else to do. $40,000. Taken from me, stolen from me, hidden from me. My hands shook. Not with rage, but with disbelief. You forged my signature, I whispered. Fern covered her face. I messed up. I messed up so badly. Dad, I'm sorry. Please, please don't leave. Please don't evict us. I'll fix it. I swear to God I'll fix it. Just give me a chance. She fell to her knees in the snow. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel torn apart. I felt clarity. Fern, I said softly, you didn't just mess up. You broke the law. She nodded rapidly. I know. Please don't call the police, please. I'm not calling the police. Her shoulders collapsed with relief. But I am done, I continued quietly. Her head snapped up. No, she whispered. Dad, please. I reached into my coat. The envelope came out again. But this time I wasn't trembling. I unfolded the 14-day notice. Vernon closed his eyes. Linda stood quietly, hands clenched, watching the final fracture in our family unfold. Fern pressed her palms into the snow, shaking her head wildly. Dad, I'll do anything, she cried. Please don't take our home. Please don't take my kids home. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I handed her the paper gently, not angrily, not triumphantly, just firmly. Finally, completely done. I'm giving you 14 days, I said. You, Vernon, and the kids can find a new place. I'll even give you money for a deposit. But you're leaving my home. She let out a broken, animal-like sound, a mixture of terror and devastation. Vernon knelt beside her, placing a shaking arm around her shoulders. She clutched the paper in numb hands. Dad, she sobbed. I'm your daughter. Yes, I whispered. And I deserved better. Linda placed a hand on my arm as I stepped away from them. Fern's cries echoed through the empty park as I walked back toward my car. I didn't look back. Not once. Because some endings aren't loud. Some endings aren't dramatic. Some endings aren't even satisfying. Some endings are necessary. I opened the car door, the cold wind biting my face. 14 days. 14 days until my home was my home again. 14 days until the consequences of years finally settled where they belonged. 14 days until I could breathe freely. As I sat behind the steering wheel, one final thought hit me. Maria would understand. Maybe she always had.